Hey, this is Spanner from the Spanner Rig Show. We have a monster episode here on episode 10. We have Katrina Christianson, the Democratic Senate candidate for the state of North Dakota. And we're going to dive into some North Dakota sports, some little tier systems, a lot, how to build a high school program. Here we go. Hey, this is Spanner from the Spanner Rig Show. We're here with Congressional Senate candidate Katrina Christianson. Katrina, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm always doing good if we get to talk some sports. And you must have it going through your blood. You're from you said Penner, Nebraska, and you are a Husker. Is that right?
I am.
And
Yes.
so
Yes.
so tell us, you
Through and
got
through.
Scott Frost, up or down? Are you in favor of what
Uh,
he's doing, or
uh,
you love Scott
yeah,
Frost?
I think I have a very dear relative that's a Buff fan. And so the rivalry between Nebraska and Colorado, has waned a little bit, mostly since Nebraska left the Big 12. But we spend a lot of time discussing Scott Frost and the trajectory of the Nebraska football team. And I would have to say, all last fall, every time that Nebraska almost won,
The almost oneers,
I
yeah.
was they almost won a lot, which means that they lost a lot. But a true fan never stops believing. And, when I look at the defense, I mean, you just go back to that Ohio State game, they kept Ohio State below, was it 23 points for the first time in like 5 years? I mean, that is no small feat. Um, and I think, defense wins games, right? They just need to figure out what kind of, offense they're going to run. When I was an undergrad at the University of Nebraska, but back in the early 2000s, we had this coach Callahan, and he was going to bring in this West Coast offense. And, Nebraska had previously always had a quarterback that could run the option, right? And Callahan was going to bring this in, and it was going to, make Nebraska, I don't know, maybe like an SEC school or something crazy like that. And they dropped off on their in-state recruiting, and just program essentially started to fall apart. I mean, and then you had Pelini, who was temperamental, but I think skilled, right? And then they brought in Mike Riley, who was milk toast. I don't think he could inspire anybody to win a game, and I mean, again,
It's a little deeper than that. I don't know if you've looked at the
okay.
numbers, but when they moved from the Big 12 to the Big 10, every year their Texas recruits got divided by two. So they went from like 46 to 23 to 12 to 6 to 4 or something. And in Texas, that's blue blood for college football recruiting. But you're right,
Sure.
Callahan
Yeah,
was brutal. I was at the Cotton Bowl game when they played Auburn. You have some ties to Auburn, and
oh,
so do you remember the Cotton
well, I
Bowl?
don't have any ties there. I mean, we lived in Auburn. My husband worked there.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
it's a beautiful campus. Yeah.
So Auburn versus Nebraska at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, and the Auburn couldn't move the ball at all. And Nebraska led, I think 7-0 or something. And it was like the late third quarter, early fourth quarter. They had 4th and 10 on their own 20, and Callahan called a fake punt. They got smashed on their own 2 yard line, so Auburn scored on the next play. And then Auburn scored on a fourth quarter drive to win it, and it was like 12-7 or 14-7 or something. The interesting thing is, Auburn didn't get a first down on any drive except for that fourth quarter drive. And had he not gone for it on fourth down, I don't know I think Nebraska wins 7-0 or 10-0 or something. But so I know the pains
Yeah,
of Callahan. Although I'm a
yeah.
Cowboys fan, and Callahan was our
Okay.
offensive line coach. And as an offensive line coach, he's been probably top 3 ever in the NFL. Every time he's ascended to a coordinator or a head coaching position, his team's gone down. But every time he's been an offensive line coach, the team has gone up. And the Great Wall of Dallas of the 90s, and then they have the Great Wall of Dallas now. It was rebuilt by Callahan. But you're right, though. He was the beginning of the end of Nebraska.
And so then that brings us back to Scott Frost coming in 2018. And, look, I mean, he had a terrific run at that school in Florida. I think that one of the things, even my dad, right? My dad is like, he's 70 and he's seen Devaney, and obviously the majority of his life was Tom Osborne. I mean, there aren't many people like Tom Osborne, and it's hard to follow in those footsteps. But Tom Osborne had, I forget how many years under Devaney to be able to learn and have an infrastructure in order to be successful. So sometimes when I see my fellow Nebraska fans not being patient, not giving him time to grow, is something that I struggle with. And that's why, when you reached out to me and I said, I feel like it's me and Scott Frost versus the world, it's about seeing the things that he has done really well, and then giving him the room to be able to be successful in those other areas. I really do think he'll find his footing, and it will be impressive when he does. I mean, we have these quarterbacks that have come in from the transfer portal that want to work hard. And I think that's really, great for the team. And, much like you were saying about, your team, the Cowboys, needing an offensive line. When I was a kid during the 90s, Nebraska, had 3 national titles, right? And the offensive line, they had some big dudes, right, that knew how to keep the quarterback safe. So I'm hopeful that they'll figure that out, and we'll have a good season coming into this next year. But
speaking of national titles games in Nebraska and the Buffaloes, you brought the Buffaloes up. Now Colorado, I seem to remember putting a 60 drop on Nebraska on was like the Friday after Thanksgiving or something, and then it seemed like 9 things had to happen after that for Nebraska to make the national title, because Colorado went on to the Big 12 title game, or the Big 8 title game, whatever it was then. And all 9 things fell into place for them, and then Nebraska went to the national title game. Did they deserve to go, or did they not deserve to go?
Oh, I mean, I'm always going to side with them deserving to go. I mean, look at Colorado's program now. I mean, yes, they did beat Nebraska, but anybody can beat Nebraska. You just have to play along. So, I think back in the 90s, when you look at Nebraska's stats from the 90s, they were pretty phenomenal. The running backs, the quarterbacks. I mean, geez, I forget the year that Tommy Frazier had blood clots. The second string quarterback, was that Eric Crouch? I'm getting them mixed up now, but it just seemed to be like even the third string was really phenomenal. So
probably like one of the best.
Lawrence Phillips probably would have been the greatest running back of all time had he had the mental health care resources available to him that we try to make available to our student athletes today. I look back at his career, and phenomenal rushing. I'm just, it's really sad. I think he was probably, like Auburn had Bo Jackson, right? I mean, probably one of the greatest natural athletes of all time, right?
Yeah, you got Bo Jackson, Herschel Walker, Lawrence Phillips, Reggie Bush. That's probably your big 4. Jim Brown. Let me ask you this one. I got one for you here. I'm gonna put you on the spot. If Nebraska played the Bison this fall, who's going to win? Who would win? Not who you'd go for. Who would win?
Well, I think that the Bison should play I mean, they should be playing the big teams. I think if they were to play last year's Nebraska team, I think that the Bison would win. I'm not, I'd like to hope that Nebraska would win. But I think, I watched a little bit of the championship game. Man, they're just scrappy and good,
No, they're good.
and they're
well
motivated.
coached. they don't miss tackles very often. They don't miss assignments very often. And when someone gets hurt, someone comes in and they know the role. It's impressive what's going on at North Dakota State, and it's like the third or fourth coach in all these runs, and all the way to Gus Bradley was at North Dakota State, and he went on was a defensive coordinator for the Seahawks.
Yeah.
So
My brother and sister are NDSU grads. And so they're really like, it's interesting to me because we all grew up in Nebraska, but they are like, they wear green and yellow. And I'm always like, why are you wearing that? Where's your red and white? Like I am the only UNL grad, or the University of Nebraska grad in my sibling cohort. So, and then, like, I'll be like, well, Nebraska won the National Women's Bowling Championship. And they'll be like, what? And I'm like, yes, they won.
they won
So
volleyball, right? Volleyball, they're really good.
well, they are phenomenal, right? They have 5 national championships,
They're
4 with John
amazing in
Cook.
volleyball.
They just barely lost to Wisconsin in the national. They came in as the number 10 seed into the tournament this last December. And I mean, you watch them play Texas and Pitt, and you are watching one of the best volleyball teams in Nebraska's history. It just wasn't good enough in that game against Wisconsin. John Cook's the coach, and he, in the press conference afterward, took responsibility for, the rotation up against Wisconsin. And he said he should have done something differently, which I wanted to bring up about Scott Frost. That brings me back to like good coaching, right? And being a professor right now and teaching student athletes, one of the things that, Scott Frost said last fall was during a press conference that they're just kids and they're gonna make mistakes, and when I see a coach owns some losses themselves and doesn't put it on the players, but or it calls out the fact that they're human, right? And they're not machines. I think that that's really brave, right? I mean, you're pushing up against this narrative, and it takes a special person to see the students as people. And so those 2 coaches I think are great for Nebraska.
So Jamestown, you guys got some stuff going on over there. Nick Becker's got quite a solid women's soccer team, and then you guys have a fantastic men's hockey team. You get to see any of the Jimmy sports there while you're an instructor, professor?
I would say I have lots of student athletes. Normally I follow what they're doing. Like the men's volleyball team was off to the NAIA tournament on Sunday morning. Of course, we had a very successful women's volleyball team, and the men's basketball team, doing very well. I myself typically don't go to games, mostly because I'm already working there 40 hours a week or more. So, but I have wanted to, I'm thinking, okay, next year I'm going to make time to do this. But I do ask the students quite a bit about, their seasons and that sort of thing. We also have, like a track team that's pretty active right now, and just what are their PRs, talking to them about those sorts of things. So I enjoy having the student athletes in my class a lot, because, like you're a Cowboys fan, I'm a Packers fan. And so all last semester, right, we were talking about, like I have lots of students are Raiders fans. I don't get that. They've got caps on for Raiders. I'm like, what? Why are you a Raiders fan? But I said early on last fall, I was like, Aaron Rodgers is going to be MVP. And they're like, no, he won't. There's no way. And I was right. He was. Even though his team lost, he was still MVP.
I'm surprised they let Devontae Adams go. It's kind of crazy. So
I don't know how that's going to work out for them.
I can't even figure out, like, and maybe we just don't know where Aaron Rodgers is coming from, but it seems like he wants more tools, and then he signed for a bunch of more money, and then, and maybe it's him. Maybe if he takes less money, they keep Devontae Adams. I don't know. I can't figure out what's going on there with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, but it seems like they're one decision away from a Super Bowl title for like the last 20 years, and they seem to make the wrong
They need a
decision.
special teams coach that knows what he's doing, I guess, or she.
That was
Somebody.
an
Yeah.
interesting one, that block punt with the Niners. But
What a crazy game.
yeah, it's just one of those games where you let someone hang around, and it's I mean, I coached for 25 years in college, and I know the the drill. If you don't put someone away, and then one freaky thing can end your season. So, one year we were the number one team in the nation, and we were in the quarterfinals. And it was early in the game, and we got called for offsides, and they couldn't even cross the midline, and they launched a ball into our box, and we cleared it, and the ball hit one of our own backs, and went back into our net. And in the rest of the game, they just put 10 people in front of their goal, and we just never scored. And at the time, we were 24-0-0, and on our way to a national title. And
Oh my gosh.
which was rough, but happens. It's tough too because we won the year before, and we had most everyone back, so it was it was rough. But
Yeah, yeah. That does sound sucky.
but I mean, that's just how it goes. I mean, you just let someone hang around in a freaky play. It's just the same thing with the Niners and Packers. I mean, the Packers were definitively better, clearly, across the board. One freaky play, and the Packers never got a first down after that. It just
No,
unraveled the whole
no.
thing. So I wouldn't be fair if I don't ask you, and I've asked Kelly Armstrong, Mark Haugen, and Rich Becker. And I'll preface it. I'll say I don't really care about these faraway places, Seattle and L.A. and New York, and I'm sure you know what's coming. But I do care about North Dakota, and I'm the voice of kind of North Dakota's people for sports. My producer will sit there and we get like 35 emails a day or whatever about different sports all around the state and whatnot. What is your feeling on transgender, playing against girls in sports? And don't, let me say, I feel really like I shouldn't say I feel. I have no idea what it's like to be maybe trapped in something that you don't feel is right. I'm 100% okay with the entire LGBTQ community, and I would never vote to suppress any of that. But I do feel like when we're talking about the purity of sports, that there's definitely, I mean, obviously, Leah Thomas wins by 5 seconds in the NCAA championships. It's kind of like a disparity. What's your feelings on North Dakota sports? On keeping Title IX and the women's right to have their own division.
Well, I think you're right. We have no idea what it's like to be a young person who is struggling or feels different than the way that we might see them. And so 100% we need to be behind those kids, like we're behind all kids, and making sure that they feel safe and comfortable and can be the best version of themselves that they want to be. And so I think we definitely, that's the thing that we need to be talking about the most. We need to support these kids so that they're not harming themselves or, choosing to do something that can't be undone, like killing themselves. And I think that the fear of something that maybe some people are struggling to understand, because it is difficult maybe for other people to understand that struggle, is really driving, I think, this discussion. And I think that, if we were to remove the fear, right, the fear of the unknown or the hate something that's different from yourself from the discussion of sports, right? Like I love women's sports. I, typically will, when I'm running every day, I usually watch some Nebraska women's sports game. That's, whatever I can find with them winning, I'm going to watch them do that. Right. So I am a feminist, and I think that we need to make sure that we are supporting women in sports, mostly because it really hasn't been along that long, right? It took us a really long time to be able to play basketball or to run in a marathon, right? Or to have teams at schools. I mean, even in the state, UND got rid of the women's hockey because they could, right? And so I think that
It's a lot more than
do.
that. I'll just tell you, Title IX was passed in 1972,
Yeah, 50
with
years ago.
25 years to comply. So it didn't comply until 1997. And I'll tell you this, I got hired as a women's coach at like 22 years
Oh,
old in college because they didn't care about the women's sport. They just put some kid in charge of it. And, but when I look at, like, back in the 90s, girls were wearing the boys' hand-me-down jerseys. They didn't get new jerseys. Like, I don't think people realize it's that recent. Like in
well,
1994, in the towns I grew up in, the girls were wearing these long jerseys on the girls' basketball games, and they were just last year's boys. It's really recent when they didn't get to compete. I don't,
yeah,
and
and
there's a
even last
small,
year's.
to me, there's a small percentage of people that, a very small percentage of people, I think, it's there though. You're right, that hate on the unknown, and the world has been forever hating, the minority different people, and that's, I mean, from the beginning of time, and it's just sad, part of human nature. But we've come so far in women's sports,
But
when
not far enough.
you're right.
Like look at last year's NCAA championship for the men and the women. We saw that athlete, was she from Washington, who was, took the video of their weightlifting setup. It was like a bench and a set of weights and a yoga mat. I don't know. And their swag was, orders of magnitude cheaper and less cool than what the men were getting. So I actually think that we need to be having two conversations. One is, how do we get equity in women's sports? And the other one is, how do we appropriately support these trans athletes so that they can be mentally healthy, but that we can make sure that women's sports continues to progress towards equality, right? And so I don't think that they need to be inversely proportional, right? And that one group wins and the other group loses. We need to make it so that both groups win, right? And that's really what I see. And I really still feel like women's sports hasn't reached equality. And I mean, I think it was there a women's coach recently in football, or was it baseball? I forgot which is.
Baseball, the
I saw
Yankees,
a
yeah.
story about it.
Yeah, Yankees
Yeah,
just
yeah.
yeah. And no, I agree. I agree 100%. Part though is going to have to come down to people watching and going to games, because just a huge part of it is just whether the game is urgent. As the decades have moved on, urgency is the number one driving factor for whether a sport matters to person. You know, baseball has dipped since the 90s because there's 162 games. And football
Well,
has
and
skyrocketed because there's 16 games. It's just basketball. People can not watch an NBA game until the last 4 minutes because NBA players take so many plays off. But when you hit that 4 minute, 5 minute mark, the urgency skyrockets in a basketball game. And if you watch a regular season basketball game, the score is 118 to 110. And then if you watch a postseason basketball game, the score is 90 to 88. So you can tell the urgency is ramped up from a lot earlier in a postseason game than a regular season game. And the same thing with a football game. There's 17, 16, 17, 18 possessions in a regular season game. There's 12, 13, or 14 possessions in a postseason game. The urgency's gone up. And then baseball is the exact same thing. You don't see all the bad pitchers. So, the fourth inning with a guy on second obviously becomes way more important in a playoff game. For girls sports, it's going to take more people talking about it. If you watch my TikTok show, the Spainer Riggs, I got the TikTok show or whatnot, or if you watch our podcast, we are 50-50. Everything I do, I will not do a single thing. And, and one of our producers said you should do a post-game locker room celebration at the state championship for the boys' state championship. And I said, no, if I can't do it on the girls' side, we're not doing it on the boys' side. It's got to be dead even across the board. And we spend a ton of time. And if you go back and listen to some of the podcasts with the stuff, we talked just as much about Kindred girls as we did Four Winds boys. You know what I mean? And we did a big thing on Maggie Fricky and the Minot girls that won State A. I just think it's got to be even, not more, not all, just equitable. And but it really is going to come down to the fans understanding the urgency and the importance of the women's game, to bring it up. But I agree that we need to make a safe space. I will say this, though. There is a kind of a push to have an open division and women's division. So only naturally born women can compete in the women's division, and then anyone can compete in the open division, including women. So that's for high school, Olympics, open and women's. I've heard that as a solution. Is that something that you would find reasonable? Would you support something like this?
This is the first that I'm hearing about this. So I like the idea that somebody's thinking of, like I said, ways to promote both women's sports and trans athletes. First of all, sports people just love sports, right? But the thing, like you were talking about, like the urgency. You don't want to watch a game where the skills aren't in alignment, right? Because there's just not that competition, like you were saying, right? So I think I would be open to that, as long as it complied with all of the laws and that sort of thing. But like I said, I really like the idea of that solution. And I think the thing that I was going to comment about women's sports here. I don't know if you knew, I think that the Nebraska-Wisconsin national championship volleyball game had record-breaking attendance, right? So that fan base is growing. And I think that, it's a snowball effect, and hopefully in 5 years from now, we are in a great place for all athletes to be successful. I think the thing that we need to focus on when we're talking about this is having compassion for other people, and just being willing to not yell at each other, and like you were saying, okay, these open things, how can we talk about it in a way that doesn't shut down the dialogue but moves it forward? So
no, and I agree. I coached women's sports for 25 years in the college level, and multiple sports too. I coached softball, women's cross country, women's track, women's basketball, mostly soccer, obviously. But it's weird too, because I got hired as a women's soccer coach. 3 years later, I took over men's and women's soccer. Both programs had really ascended. The AD came to me and said, "Look, maybe you should choose one or the other to get over the top, And I chose the women, and I felt like I had a calling, a niche, you know, I don't know what, but I felt like, you know, helping build self-esteem was important, you know, and I enjoy it. I'm still good friends with almost every girl that's played for me. I'm sure there's girls that were on the bench probably don't like me as much, but you know, it is what it is. But I love all my
That's
girls,
why
and
there's a transfer portal.
there is a transfer portal. I don't agree with that, but
Can, 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 can we talk about the transfer portal? Because
we can.
I feel like, you know, and maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm old, but man, don't you just have to earn that spot?
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
the transfer portal is wrecking sports. It's absolutely wrecking sports, and it's going to be. It's just, you know, and it's wrecking young lives. It's not building lives. Kids can just get on an app and they're done. They're gone. You know, coach can get on a kid and they're gone. And Nick Saban got up and he spoke about, like, you know, we shouldn't allow this to happen. We should get these kids to fight for their spot. We don't want to be afraid to hold kids accountable for their actions off or on the field. And but now coaches are afraid to hold kids accountable because they'll just enter the portal. You know, you suspended a game. All right, I'm out. I'm entering the portal. You know, and I think that we've lost a little bit of conflict resolution skills. Maybe we're losing. We're losing. You know, some grit. You know, some fight. If we had to take today's young kids and storm the beaches of Normandy, you know, would we have the intangibles to get that done? You know, those are the things that I wonder. It's just too easy now. I mean, and I don't know. I didn't have a lot of problems with the portal, but it's there.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you know, I'm not running it and I'm not sure what the rules are, you know, like, okay, yeah, this isn't a good fit for me, you know, but transferring every year, just I'm thinking about it more from an academic continuity point of view, you know, like, what about your studies? I mean, you know, like, it seems like that would be hard potentially, particularly as a student athlete, to be able to pick that component up while you're also doing these other things. So I'm thinking about it
I'll tell
more
you
from
this.
an academic point of view.
Well, that's huge also, and I mean a lot of the major sports they're just thinking dollars, but and they're getting a lot. I mean, there's a lot of money being paid to athletes. You know, the Cavender girls are making more than $1 million each, and I sat on an NIL committee meeting that was on, you know, nationwide Zoom or whatever, and it was the numbers were staggering, favoring the women than the men on the NIL deals, and you know, and I don't know,
Really?
once football started, I don't know how it's changed. This was before the first football season of NIL, but yeah, no, well, I mean, like now girls can, you know, you get a pretty girl shooting golf and you know, or whatever, you know, and on TikTok or something. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, a lot of that, and there's a lot of stuff with you know, Olympic swimming hopefuls and future tennis stars, and you know, those are big stars. Could you name the starting left tackle at Nebraska right now? I mean, like that guy's not getting paid versus someone who has a chance to go to Wimbledon. You know,
Right. No, you're making it. Could I? No.
That's
Could
my
I name
point,
some
though.
tackles from the 90s? Sure.
But the left tackle
I'm
for Nebraska this year is one of the most important
No,
pieces
I
for that
couldn't.
team.
Not this year. No.
But,
My brother could, but I couldn't.
I'm just saying,
But
could most big sports fans name Justin Jefferson and Joe Burrow before they had that explosive season at LSU? It just happened, and Joe Burrow became the Heisman Trophy winner. Most people don't know. They'll know a few of the like 3 or 4 or 5 of the top basketball players coming in, but they don't know. But boosters will just listen to Nick Saban and say, who's the best guy that we got to get, you know, or whatever. So the portal, the portal's rough. The NIL, it's interesting, but there's a problem when Caleb Williams is QB1 at Oklahoma, one of the most sought after quarterback spots to get to the NFL, and he puts himself on the portal for highest bidder. Academics don't matter. Tradition doesn't matter. It was just purely dollars. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah,
but hey, it's been fantastic talking to you. I really appreciate you coming on. It was an interesting discussion. I really like where you went with some of the questions, especially academics as it comes to the portal and mental health. Yes. When it comes to the transgender question, I think it's really important. It's a unique perspective, and I look forward to being in Jamestown. Spainer will be on the road, and maybe we can say hi.
Excellent.
Maybe we can say hi.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for letting me talk with you about Nebraska and everything adjacent to that. So I really actually had a lot of fun. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
All right, we're here at the high school segment here on the Spainer Riggs podcast. An area that we really wanted to dive in. We kind of touched on it a little bit before, but we really wanted to take a deep dive. Basically, the class system being spread out through all of high school. I mean, of course, football's got technically 5 spots, levels. We've got basketball's got 2, hockey's got 2, track's got 2. What about soccer? One soccer. So with this, we wanted to see, dive into it. I think we kind of agree on some of them, maybe disagree on another one, but of them all, like for instance, the big one is the glaring one is basketball. I mean, especially because there's just so many teams. Now it's co-oping. I feel like there's just a big disparity. Of course, we know that there's a huge disparity in talent. Of course, if anybody watches, there's no comparison from Class A to Class B. But do you think, a need to be able to spread it out a little bit, maybe move the bigger schools to a double A and then bring down some A's, move up some B's, and then give your theory of credit that you think your B's are so good? But being able to do like an A and then having a B, I would assume the traditionalists would have a heart attack on the fact that you would remove the B and take that lure out of it. But what are your thoughts? I'm a huge proponent. I think that there should be 3 classes, based on, size.
I think there should be 3 classes also. It should be A, B, and C. And when I look at it, you have all these random co-ops. Mm-hmm. Let those school kids play for their school. You remove the co-ops. All those tiny ones would be in a C. Mm-hmm. Then you take your huge Bs, and all the big B schools mm-hmm. and those private schools. Let that be your B, and then you have your tiny C, or if you want to keep that big name with the mm-hmm. B, go double A, B, like you said, and then but you can have your one massive division, you know what I mean? Like, yep. And then maybe your smallest A's would slide down into the Kindreds and the Bishop Ryans and Shilohs, yep. and maybe Williston and Dickinson would come in down or whatnot. Yeah. The new Minot school, maybe it's going to be smaller, or maybe Minot will be smaller and the new one will be bigger. I don't know. But,
Because honestly, like the part of the thing is that I feel like it's just so wishy-washy, especially in the female sports. Like Bismarck, as an example, in girls high school hockey, it's 3 high schools, has 1 team. Like, how do you determine? Is it just based on youth numbers? Like, I mean, it's just are you based on enrollment size only?
Are they making cuts for 1 team when they have 3 schools?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think they are.
If they're making cuts, and then at some point you're going to have to.
But they have talked about it that they are supposed to be adding a second one. But
here's my thing. It takes 7 billion people. Obviously, I'm exaggerating. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of people to play football, mm-hmm. and you have 5 divisions.
Yeah, exactly.
So is basketball just so precious that you're keeping it at 2, or
Because some of those co-ops feel like they are getting a little out of hand, to be honest with you. And maybe it is something like you've got all 4 high schools to create 1 basketball team. Really?
I want to see 4 wins boys be playing against those A's.
I know, but that should honestly be I know there's those 2 basketball tournaments kind of around Christmas time. They're kind of like showcases or whatever. There's 2 days worth of it. That is when they should be doing the like crossover stuff, because they did it when, was it Gabby Bowl and Hannah Stewart and Maddie Wald when they went through that dynasty of Bishop Ryan girls basketball. And then I can't remember, did they play Cheyenne? I think they played Cheyenne and they lost a close game.
Yeah.
Who was the defending, I think, Class A champ. But it was awesome. And honestly, like, there's a lot of excitement there. And honestly, truth be told, kind of the biggest underlining thing is, I think that this tiering system would benefit the high school athletes at the next level. Because, of course, the challenge, with some of these sports is exposure, right? You want to get exposure, get a look. There's always, I don't know what you want. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying to that?
I'll tell you right now, Bishop Ryan and Four Winds will be able to compete with any Class A next year.
Yeah.
Bishop Ryan next year is going to be legit.
Now, compete as in, would you throw them in like the West region and see them come out of the West?
I think they take top 4 in the West next year.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Come on, man.
Come on.
You didn't tell me that Four Winds would have taken top 4 in the East?
Oh, jeez. I mean, hey, but
I don't even know that Four Winds wouldn't win A.
Oh my goodness.
Four Winds has 3 or 4 kids that are going to be playing big time college
Oh,
basketball
yeah.
this year, man. They're good.
Well, and the
Slim Reaper, buddy.
but it would honestly though, it's a lot of intrigue, right? I mean, the football, there's no question, there's no way that any of that would happen. I mean, because the reason why is you get a situation like Velva, who is, I believe, whatever it is, tier 3 in true size, but had to apply for a waiver to move up because they are a perennial powerhouse, and they did get it. So I think because their enrollment doesn't allow them, they could go down a level and they would win the state championship year after year, especially with what Sandy's done with that program. We talk about culture in your high school sports and like drawing all of the best athletes of that school play football, kind of similar to what they do with wrestling. And then, of course, they have linear basketball. But would you be able to do that in this system? Would there be like, European soccer where relegation and stuff? I don't know. What do you know?
To me, it should be by class, school size. That's it. Hire a coach that builds a program. Bottom line is, if you hire a good coach and they build a program and they get the culture to drop all the way into the youth and they start drawing athletes, you're going to be successful. Not just on the field, but if you have a good coach, your kids will be successful off the field and in the classroom. And that's how high school sports are about. Being a member of your community, being good in the classroom, and being fundamentally sound and playing to win for your community.
Now that's obviously the recipe, but I know obviously with your high school success when you were coaching it, but I just don't see that there's enough continuity and enough dedication within, all of the programs unilaterally. You know what I mean? Like it feels like whenever
my statement
you know
is
what I mean?
to any AD, any principal, any community, you want a good football team, hire someone that's going to put the DNA of their program all the way through the youth. You want a good soccer program, hire someone who's going to build it all the way down. I mean, if you're teaching your system when they get to varsity, you're not going to be very good. If you're teaching your system, and I look, when I coached high school and I was in a much bigger state and we won CIF, California Interscholastic Federation titles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. I coached the 6-year-olds, the 7-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, the 9-year-olds, and because I just didn't want to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some lean years, and then when they finally got to this high school, it was
There's just not that type of.
Get your popcorn ready, as Terrell
No, no, and you're absolutely right, but that's the challenge though, because honestly, when you read like the Minot Daily News or follow some of these guys on social media, it seems like there's just a revolving door of coaching changes. There's some staples, don't get me wrong, that have been there for a while, but like it just seems like, I mean, even Bishop Ryan, you think about how many coaches they had there for the last, decade. It seems like 3 or 4. Now Brody's finally, I think, honestly, Brody's going to be a long-term solution there. He's a Bishop Ryan guy, and I mean, he went from, our Redeemers to Bishop Ryan. I feel like he'll be there forever, and that's just one of his goals is
Wait,
to be just the powers. But you know what I
it's
mean?
a good
though?
point. I'll tell you
You know
this.
what I mean?
If a school's hiring a coach to win games,
Yep.
they're just not going about it the right way.
Yeah.
If they're hiring a coach to build people, you know what I mean? To
Mhm.
develop kids, in the classroom, understand the importance of their community, then it's worth it. You go out and find that person. If you're going to get, some amazing basketball coach that doesn't care about anything but winning a ring or whatever, then you're just not going to be very successful.
No.
And then it becomes purely transactional and not transformational, in my opinion.
Well, and like you said, with 3, I mean, the same thing you talk about basketball could revolve into hockey. I mean, what about track? I would have thought that would have been all just one. I mean, because track's one of those outlying ones where a lot of these sports require depth and these smaller schools don't have depth, right? I mean, football's simple. Even in basketball, to get, 8 to 9 guys to make a tangible roster requires bodies. Track and field, you're the fastest, you're the longest jumper, high jumper, shot put. You think about why they wouldn't have one class for track, or is there just too many kids, or what?
I think that they should have one class for the individual record events.
Yep.
And then 2 classes for the team scoring.
Yeah.
California's got 1 class for everything in track. North Dakota's got 2.
It must have been a wild state meet then, or whatever it is. I mean, how many kids are allowed to participate?
I want to say 89 or 1989, I think. A small school won California state track meet with 2 kids.
No way.
Well, I mean,
Crazy.
you've got there's 300 schools per section, right? So there's 8 sections or 9 sections. There's 2,000 plus schools, and but a kid named Richard Kalista wins the pole vault.
Okay.
15.6, I think he got, right? And then Reggie Williams doubles in the mile and 2 mile, which is nearly impossible in California because they have to run a heat in the mile, and then they got to run the final in the mile, and then they got to run a final in the 2 mile.
Oh boy!
So that's all in 2 days, right? So and he's a sub 4 guy, like a 404 to 350.
They still use the imperial system for that, or they don't use metric like the rest of the world, or what?
Well, I don't know. The 1600 days.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, anyway,
Yep.
They get 30 points right there, and then I think Reggie Williams was like a 48-foot triple jumper as well. He also was like a 25-point basketball guy. He
Seems like
a cross country, and he was the MVP of the soccer league too.
Seems like these guys are like, what do you call these? Like heptathletes or whatever, like decathlons or whatever. Yeah.
So, but anyway, this little small school ended up getting like 30-some points. But when you spread that over the whole state, and Hawthorne, which was like a perennial state champion, because they, they'd be like 1, 2, 5 in the 100-meter. They win the 4x100. They go on and on. I think they beat They clipped Hawthorne by 1 point.
Crazy.
But that's not gonna happen. That's like Hoosiers and.
Oh, I love that movie. Absolutely.
Movie.
But I mean, again, the track and field seems like it's a, natural, synergy with it. But girls soccer has one, right? Should they be splitting that out?
Got one.
Is there just not enough teams?
But I'll tell you right now, Minot could field 2 teams right now that could both make state and make a run.
Absolutely.
I mean, they won the state championship 6-0, and it was 6-0 early in that game. They could have, like the Burke girls didn't play in the second half. And they had a backup goalie playing center forward in the second half.
Yikes.
You know what I mean? So,
but
speaking of that, so let's talk a little spring sports. Huh?
Okay.
Dickinson's off to their start in softball and baseball, and they're legit in both.
For sure.
It looks like Grand Forks Red River's off to a fast start. They came over west, though. I think they kind of put a beat down on Minot and Williston.
Okay.
Minot High softball's undefeated. So maybe we get a big battle between
and you know what?
Minot and Dickinson will be a good game.
And I just want to interject. I mean, I think kind of goes back to what you said earlier about where fast pitch is going, because up until 5 years ago, there really wasn't any structure to youth girls fast pitch. And, Thor Nelson's been kind of a big spearhead. There's other ones involved, but being able to actually get some structure, get some organization, and then, of course, being able to build the new renovations to the softball complexes, which, North Dakota, I mean, your weather, I mean, like even right now, the weather we're getting right now, snowstorm, I bet people don't realize, and obviously we got most of our followers and people that watch from North Dakota, but, we're getting hammered with snow, is theoretically, that snow could be down to weather being decent on Friday or Saturday. You just brush it off and you can play. If that had been natural grass, I'll see you later in a week, if not longer.
Yeah.
If that 2 feet of snow
But
sits there and
Dickinson's a good
lingers.
example. They won the state softball championship 10-0, and they're one of the smallest classes.
It is,
right?
yeah.
You know, I don't know, maybe Wapaton's smaller. I don't know, you know, but my point is, you know, if you get someone solid, you can get it running. Interesting game, though. I went to Minot High versus Mandan High, and Mandan kind of gave the guarantee, you know, that they were, and Minot put them down 5-1. Actually, Minot's, they're good.
Mm-hmm.
And Macy Burke still hurt. She got the she's not cleared, I don't think, till next week with the broken collarbone.
Oh boy.
So
yikes. But you know what? But you'll see though those numbers have grown here in Minot's region. So now you will hopefully see, like we talked about off the air about, you know, developing your youth programs and getting more numbers, and then eventually it'll lead to, you know, strength in numbers as you get older. But you know, back before, like I said, 5 years ago, there was no structure, no nothing. Now you've got organization from Minot Youth Fast Pitch, and now you've got proper leagues, you got, you know, age groups, and now you're seeing more numbers because my daughter plays in the U8s, and I think like 3 years ago there was no such thing as U8s Fast Pitch. Now there's 4 teams just in Minot playing, so now you've got say 40-ish odd girls, and if they keep on progressing and moving, you're going to have an upward trend, you know.
Numbers help.
They do.
But DNA or system into the DNA is what makes your team into a dynasty. And you know, and I'm gonna beat a horse till it's dead, but system into the DNA is more than just fundamentals. It's developing the person. Mm-hmm. So when you develop the person, you know, the kids take on like, you know, their sophomore year, between their junior year, they start to work out for their teammates. They start to work out because they want their community to win. You know, they start to work out for more than themselves. You know, when you're building people, you know, you're adding to your community, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that you will hopefully see that. And, you know, the big thing, too, in Minot, which I think is across the landscape, too, which is I've learned in all of sports, is if you build it, they will come, kind of like the Field of Dreams thing. And the same thing is with facilities. I experienced it as a Canadian in Saskatoon when they built the first major indoor soccer complex, which had 4 indoor arenas, and they had this kind of like a walking path, and youth numbers got really big. And then they built another monster one on another side of the city where they got 2 youth indoor ones, and then in the middle a full size, you know, 100-yard soccer field indoors, and shoot, the numbers exploded. And
Massive
you talk about Canada,
point.
huge, because now kids can play year round, and it, you know.
Let me add to it. You know, you're talking about a winter city in the Midwest, in Canada. So you're building indoor facilities. Mm-hmm. So it's giving someone something to do. Mm-hmm. Still doesn't matter. You build a badass stadium. Yeah. You know, people are gonna want to come see it, right? You know, Cowboys open a new stadium. People come to see it, right? Players want to play there. So everything you're saying is true. But look at NCAA World Series baseball, Division I.
Okay.
Almost every team that makes the World Series every year is below the I-10.
Oh boy.
Now, obviously, weather is a factor, just like what you're saying, weather is a factor.
Yeah.
But where do all the former baseball players and coaches retire? Pretty much below Arizona and Florida. Am I
For
wrong?
sure,
you know, Southern California and whatever.
I agree.
You know, so you know, like if you're in Spain, they have more than 13,000 UEFA A licensed coaches. Okay, there's no like England's got like 5,000. Just to give you an example, right? So all the coaches bleed all the way into the youth, right? All these, you know, there's not enough places for them. When you look at below the I-10 in baseball, all these former major leaguers are coaching their kids and whatnot. It bleeds all the way into the youth. So I mean, I believe that if you get the face of someone who's building it the right way, in a transformational way, I think it's a lot easier to get the facility. And I
believe it.
If what you're saying is a big part of it. Facility, the face, you can have a legendary dynasty.
Because I would honestly think that if both UND and NDSU didn't have indoor domes, There is no way they're recruiting kids to come up here and play. Even though culture is good, that'd be a nightmare playing outside. I don't know. And you see the same thing. I mean, like, geez, it gets to be miserable cold, but, you know, it kind of ties into it. But you're absolutely right. You have to connect the dots and being able, I wonder that could be the movement that could be starting to happen here with basketball. You know, now you got the new basketball training facility. You know, my good buddy Wade Williamson's got his place kind of in the shop now, and he's got plugged with kids with Blueprint Basketball. And what's happened is, again, he just built a court in a shop. And my daughter was one of the first kids. There was only like 3 or 4 of them. And then it spreads like wildfire. And in the wintertime, you can't get gym space in Minot anywhere. And all of a sudden, boom, 2 nights a week, he's got kids in there all the time. And now I'm seeing pictures. They've got teams that are like renting it and stuff, and it's growing. So I think you're like, kind of like you said, a combination of two, and you need that. But I think part of the problem what's happened in maybe a lot of youth sports is there hasn't been any coaching for coaches. Like you said, some of the stuff you're talking about, like for me, you know, my learning that I've learned a lot was through major conventions in Florida, where I get to see all Division I coaches, NHL coaches, and they talk about everything. They go from like what they would do in X's and O's to culture and all that stuff. You can't get any of that stuff around here, especially in hockey. Like you know what I mean? Like I remember,
And
you know that's a big thing.
Are coaches doing it to win, or are they doing it for the kids?
I know.
You know,
I think the ones that have that.
That's the new type of coach now.
It is.
Pretty self-serving, I think.
For sure, especially the ones that are, you know, obviously trying to maybe use it as potentially a stepping stone and not, you know, developing it. And, you know, you see it at the college level, especially like the Division IIs and the Division IIIs. Division III hockey, I mean, those guys, I mean, to exception of maybe about a third of them, the other 2/3, you know, they're just trying to make sure they get seen and, you know, win a few games and maybe go on one tournament run that just gets them to the next level, right? Whereas, you know, some of these coaches have been doing it for decades, have won multiple national championships. So
let's find out what they think.
Agreed.
Tell us what you guys think. North Dakota basketball. Let's put that one on one side. 3-tier, 2-tier. We'd love to hear from you. And if there's another sport that interests you and you think, you know, is football have too many divisions and have not enough divisions? I can't imagine none.
I know.
But all the baseball, softball, you know, some of these sports, they have 9 people. It might be a lot tougher for them, than to go to more divisions. Maybe got a co-op. Let us know.
Another great episode here at Spainer and Riggs. We're excited for next week. We got some pretty cool special guests. We're going to dive into NASCAR, talking a little bit of racing, which we all know the history here in Minot. We're also going to talk a little girls basketball, specifically out in Grafton and South Dakota. We got a great interview probably coming up for that, which is going to be really exciting. And then, of course, it's a snowstorm of the century. We got a big contest. You're going to watch out here. We got some gifts to go out. We want to see the best snow angel with this 2 feet of snow, which is going to be exciting. So we want to see your best one. Tag us on TikTok and make sure you let us know at Spainer and Riggs.